Hi, welcome to day 30 of Science Challenge. Today we're going to have a look at the reproductive organ of a plant. So we're going to have a look at a flower and we're going to dissect it. We're going to pull it apart and have a look at some of the different parts of it. So for this, you're going to need some kind of flower. Okay, so maybe the next time you go out on a walk, have a look, see if you can find one from somewhere. I've just got one of these. I think this is a clematis flower, so very beautiful, but there's quite a lot of spring flowers around at the moment. So you're going to need a flower. You're going to need some kind of board. I've got here some tweezers, okay, which are going to be useful. I've got some sharp scissors. Just find the best scissors that you can in the house. And then I've got a craft knife. I mean, it's got quite a rusty blade, but that's going to be quite useful. If you haven't got a craft knife or a scalpel, just a regular kitchen knife might be useful. You are going to, obviously, because of that, you're going to need some adult supervision, okay? But hopefully it shouldn't be too dangerous. We don't need to do anything. We're not cutting anything tough. Okay, the other thing that I've done already is I prepared a table. Okay, so these are the parts of the flower that I'm going to be looking for as I do my dissection. Okay, I've got a little diagram of my flower here with them all numbered. Okay, I've identified the parts that are male and the parts that are female because a flower amazingly has both female and male reproductive parts. Okay. And so we're going to be having a look for the male part and the female part, as well as the female sex cell and the male sex cell. Okay, so we're going to see which of those we can find. So you might want to do a table like this. And then this final column, it says on there, description and function. So you might want to do a bit of research on the internet and find out a little bit more about each of these parts and write it in that box. Okay. What I'm going to do is as I dissect the flower, I'm going to be placing the pieces in here and I'm going to sellotape them down. So I've got some evidence of them. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing we need is a petal. So all I'm going to do is I'm just going to use my tweezers. I'm just going to see if it pulls off. If it doesn't, I'm just going to use my craft knife to cut on the base of the petal. You could use your scissors also. There we go, just to remove my petal. There we go. Okay, and I'm going to place it on there and then I'm going to sellotape it in a minute. Okay, next we've got something called a sepal. Okay, so the sepal is a bit underneath the petal that holds it in place. So actually you can see where I've pulled my petal off, I've got a bit of sepal here. Okay, so again, I'm just going to use my craft knife. I'm going to cut that off. Just be really careful watching those fingers. You can see there the sepal is actually protecting the bottom of the petal. Oh dear. Okay, so I'm going to use my tweezers and I'm going to place that on there as well. On some flowers you'll have a much more obvious sepal. Okay, it'll be green and it'll be the bit that goes around the bottom of the flower. Okay, the next thing I'm going to look for then is the male part. Now there's lots of these, so you can see all of these thin parts here. These are the male parts. So these are called the stamen. Okay, the top bit is the anther, and then this long bit down here is the filament. Okay, if I turn this around, then you'll be able to see it a little bit more easily. Okay, so together they make up the stamen, and then we've got the anther at the top and the filament. Now the anther has got pollen on it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few. You can see on the flower how many male parts there are. There's absolutely loads of male parts. Okay, so I'm just going to take them and I'm going to try and just wipe them on here. I'm not sure whether or not you'll be able to see it, but on the top of the anthers there is pollen. Okay, so I'm just wiping it onto there. I'm not sure whether or not it's going to be very obvious. Again, depending on what flower you get, the size of the pollen. If you've got bigger pollen grains, then they're going to be more obvious on there. Okay, but hopefully I've got a little bit of pollen on there. Okay, so the next bit I'm going to look for is the female part of the plant or the flower. Now that is the middle bit, this bit in here. Okay, and actually where I've cut already, you can see down here, this sort of denser bit down here, that's actually the ovary and it contains the ovules. Okay, so that's where the egg, essentially what are the eggs. So I'm going to try and pull that bit out. Okay, so in this flower, which slightly unusually, there's quite a few female parts as well. Okay, so normally there'll just be one actually, and you'll see that when you do your dissection, there's one kind of obvious one in the middle, whereas on this flower it's kind of made up of various different segments. In fact, that one might be a better one to pull out because it's a bit thicker. Okay. All right, so I'm going to pop that down there. So the top is called the stigma. Then we've got the style. And then at the bottom, we've got the ovary. Now, my ovary has actually remained on my flower. So I'm just going to use my scissors. I'm going to really carefully cut out the ovary here. Okay, as you can tell, by the end, there's not going to be much of my flower left. Okay, so that is my ovary. Okay, now my ovules are the eggs in the middle of that. Now I don't think on this flower I'm going to be able to get them out. Let's just have a really good look in here. Okay, let's see if I can see any individual. Okay, we can take one of these out using the tweezers. I think pop it down there. Okay. All right, so there's the ovary and there's one of the ovules. And then I've got my pollen down there, which when I wiped the top of the anthers. Okay, so my final thing then, so have a really good look at that, at your flower. Try and identify all the different parts. Use the internet to help you as well if you need to. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to use a little bit of sellotape to sellotape each part of your flower onto your table. Okay, this will just mean that you can then keep it as a reference to the parts of the flower. Okay, so I've now taped these on. So my table is now ready to have the description and the function filled in. But let me just tell you a little bit about what happens. Depending on how the flower is pollinated, so it might be wind pollinated or it might be pollinated by an insect, we'll focus on an insect one. Okay, so what happens is the bee or the fly or the wasp or whatever will fly into the flower to pick up some sweet nectar from the middle of the flower. Okay, as it does, it brushes past the anthers and the pollen on the surface of the anthers sticks to that insect. Okay, so might be on the legs of the bee. That bee will then move to another flower of the same species. It will go in again to look for the sweet nectar, and the pollen that's on its legs will rub off onto the top of the carpel or pistil, which is the stigma, the style, and the ovary. I didn't mention that all of those three together are called the carpel, or when you do the your research on the internet, you might find that it's called the pistil. Okay, so the pollen lands on the top of the carpel, on the stigma, and then the pollen grows a tube down to the egg, where it meets the egg, the ovule, and fertilization happens, and that's where we get our seeds from. Okay. Might form a fruit first and then we'll form the seeds. Okay, so go and have a look for a flower in the garden. Make sure you ask permission before you pick your mum's best tulips, but make sure you ask, but go and find a flower and have a good look at it and see if you can identify these different parts. Enjoy.